For decades, the United States and India have drawn closer, united by shared democratic values and strategic interests. Washington viewed New Delhi as a vital partner and a counterweight to China's rise. This natural alliance led to joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, and booming trade. The Indian diaspora in the US further strengthened cultural and economic ties. As the world's largest democracy, India seemed a natural friend for the US in a complex region. Both nations worried about China's assertiveness and regional stability. Landmark agreements like the US-India civil nuclear deal signaled deepening trust. But recently, cracks have appeared in this partnership. Policy shifts and economic disputes have introduced friction, testing the strategic consensus. India, under Prime Minister Modi, is now re-evaluating its foreign policy and exploring new alignments. A closer India-China relationship could reshape global power dynamics and weaken the US-led coalition in Asia. It could also create a new economic bloc less dependent on the West. The world is watching as India navigates this uncertain path. Decisions made in New Delhi today will ripple across the globe, challenging old assumptions. The future of international alliances may hinge on India's next moves. The first sign of change came when Prime Minister Modi publicly criticized US tariffs on Chinese goods. Unlike other leaders, Modi's statement was a bold defense of the global trading system. He warned that protectionism could trigger a cycle of retaliation, harming developing economies. By challenging US policy on an international stage, Modi questioned Washington's leadership. He signaled that India would not automatically side with the US in economic disputes. This was a pivotal moment. India was asserting its independence in global affairs. Modi's remarks opened the door for other countries to question US trade policies. More importantly, it created an opening for China. Beijing saw a chance to find common ground with New Delhi, as both faced American economic pressure. Modi's statement was interpreted in Beijing as a sign India might be receptive to closer cooperation. This public rebuke laid the groundwork for a potential realignment between the two Asian giants. India's foreign policy was now guided by its own interests, not Western expectations. The world took notice. India was no longer a predictable US ally. This shift set the stage for a new era in Asian geopolitics. The implications for global power balances were profound. India's independent stance was now shaping the region's future. The friction between the US and India soon moved beyond words. After targeting China, Washington imposed tariffs on Indian exports like steel and aluminum, hitting Indian industries hard. The US justified these moves as efforts to balance trade, but India saw them as unfair and unilateral. The US also revoked India's special trade status, a blow to Indian exporters. Officially, this was about market access, but in India, it felt like economic pressure from a supposed friend. Beyond trade, the US criticized India's continued defense ties with Russia, especially the S-400 missile deal. Washington warned of possible sanctions, putting India in a tough spot between old and new partners. This combination of economic and strategic pressure frustrated Indian policymakers. They felt the US was ignoring India's sovereignty and complex realities. What was meant to be a partnership of equals now felt one-sided. The American squeeze pushed India to seek alternatives and diversify its foreign policy. New Delhi began to reconsider its reliance on the US. The result, India started looking for new partners and a more balanced approach. The era of automatic alignment with Washington was over. India's search for autonomy was underway. The US-India relationship was at a crossroads. The world watched as India charted a new course. In response to US pressure, India adopted a new India First policy. Every foreign policy decision would now be judged by its benefit to India's core interests. This marked a shift from aligning with the US-led democratic bloc to strategic autonomy. When faced with US tariffs, India retaliated with its own tariffs on American goods. This tit-for-tat showed India would not be bullied on trade. On the strategic front, India defended its relationship with Russia, moving ahead with the S-400 missile deal despite US threats. Indian officials insisted these were sovereign decisions based on national security. The message: India would not let any country dictate its alliances. This approach was pragmatic, not anti-American. Indian leaders saw the risks of relying too heavily on one partner in a multipolar world. Recent US unpredictability was a wake-up call. India needed more options and flexibility. The India First pivot led to a more balanced foreign policy. Strengthening ties with China became part of this new strategy. India was now determined to act in its own best interests. The era of strategic autonomy had begun, Guided by its new policy, India took real steps to improve ties with China. India eased restrictions on Chinese imports, lowering costs for consumers and signaling a diplomatic thaw. The two countries agreed to cooperate on rare earth minerals, securing vital resources for India. India deepened its involvement in organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS, working alongside China and Russia. High-level military talks were initiated to reduce border tensions and build trust. These moves would have been unthinkable just years ago. India and China were now building bridges in trade, security, and diplomacy. The shift was deliberate and strategic. India's foreign policy was being redefined in real time. China quickly responded to India's shift with a charm offensive. Beijing offered billions in infrastructure investment, high-speed rail, ports, smart cities. Chinese tech giants promised partnerships and technology transfer in fields like 5G and AI. China promoted a vision of an integrated Asian market, with India as a key partner. The China-India Plus model suggested a partnership of equals, shaping Asia's future together. Diplomatic meetings emphasized mutual respect and downplayed past conflicts. China saw a strategic opportunity to pull India away from the US orbit. The incentives were hard for India to ignore. A new, closer relationship was taking shape. Washington watched India's growing closeness with China with alarm. The US Indo-Pacific strategy depended on India as a counterweight to China. India's pivot threatened this entire framework. In response, the US launched a diplomatic push to win India back. High-level officials visited New Delhi, emphasizing shared democratic values and the China threat. Talks of a new trade deal and restoring trade benefits surfaced. The US promoted American companies as better partners than China. But trust was damaged. Indian leaders were now skeptical of US promises. They had seen how quickly American policy could shift. India listened, but continued building ties with Beijing. Now, both the US and China were competing for India's favor. India found itself in a powerful negotiating position. The geopolitical landscape had shifted. India's choices were now central to the global balance of power. The world was watching a new era unfold. The deepening India-China partnership became clear with new joint economic institutions. A China-India investment fund was launched to back tech startups and infrastructure across the region. This fund created shared interests and made their partnership more resilient. Chinese capital now flowed directly into India, opening new opportunities for entrepreneurs. India and China also developed a cross-border payment system, settling trade in rupees and yuan. This move challenged the dominance of the US dollar in global trade. By reducing reliance on the dollar, both countries gained protection from US sanctions. These joint structures marked a shift from cautious dialogue to active cooperation. A new economic axis was emerging independent of the West. The center of global power was shifting eastward, led by India and China.